Shane, welcome to the show. Your book, The Power of Remote, is a beacon for many. Could you share with us the personal and professional journey that led you to co-author this enlightening guide?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I joined Vertira 4 years ago, and if you know your math, that was around the same time the pandemic started. Up until that point, I was working in offices. A lot of startups. Did a stint at Disney, which is fantastic. But Vertira had over 15 years of remote work experience at that point. And when I joined, Cynthia Watson, who's the owner of the company, wanted to work with someone like myself who had a lot of experience working in an office, because obviously there's that gap if you have been working remotely for 15 years, to learn how can we bring the two together to make a book that could help people who are in the office, who have been forced into remote work by the pandemic, understand what it is that they need to do and change in order to make remote work successful. So it seemed like the right thing to do, and we started the book as the typical story around 2021, and it took a lot longer to complete than we thought it would. But at the end of the day, it was launched in February of last year, and with pretty good reviews actually. So I'm pretty happy with it.
That's excellent. So what would you say is like one of the main tips that you want to get out from the book for everyone? What's the main thing?
Yeah, thanks. There's some overlapping underlying concepts, and I think one of the most important things is that remote work needs to be more intentional. People have to accept the fact that these organic experiences you have in the office, which we all take for granted, they just don't happen remotely, and that is either a real detriment or a superpower for you. Because what happens is that if you start to think about, okay, if I can't rely on or innovation to happen organically, how am I going to make sure innovation happens? It's that extra step that requires you to think through the process and understand what your team needs to do in order to succeed. And it's the same thing that should happen at any successful company, but remote work forces you to do it. And it's like taking the training wheels off. So that would be my first big tip, is that don't take anything for granted. Set up a plan for everything in your company, everything from communication to reporting to technology use and innovation and so on and so forth, and make sure that you have a plan for it and understand how your organization does it.
Absolutely. So making sure that you take that extra step and not taking for granted the fact that, oh, things will just work because we are using these communication platforms. So that you have to make sure that you're also innovating, because I feel like with remote work, you're missing that kind of like hanging out like by the water cooler conversations that might get some other ideas out. So you would have to implement that into remote work as well.
Yeah, and what I remind people is that allowing things to happen organically does not guarantee that they're done successfully either, right? What often happens, and I have another big spiel about how to manage relatedness in your workforce, how to keep the relationship side going, and we could probably talk for hours on that. The thing there is that you can have bad experiences at work as well, which prevent you from being successful. One of the things I really appreciate about Vertira is that I've worked with people who many of them I've never met in person, and we have such a great work relationship, and there's no drama. We're just there to work. We're just there to get to collaborate, complement each other's weaknesses and pluses, and do what we can to move things forward. And that to me helps, from my perspective, helps peel away all the stuff that sometimes gets in the way of being successful.
Definitely. I really like what you said about the no drama relationship that you had, because I think that's so important at work. Like it improves you feel better about working with them as well. But also like with remote work, you can make sure that you don't get into those toxic situations that you would otherwise have to be in.
That's right.
So in your view, Shane, how is technology reshaping the entrepreneurial landscape for non-technical founders, especially in the context of remote work?
For me, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. For those of us like myself who have grown up with technology, I've been there since I won't say the very start. It started a lot longer before I did. But I consider myself relatively technically savvy and pick up things relatively quickly. And I'm willing to put up with technology that maybe isn't working, as we maybe experienced earlier with me not getting into the meeting when we started this podcast. You have to have a solid understanding of remote work, and tools like AI, although they've significantly lowered the barrier for startups, they can also provide a barrier for people who are not familiar with them. And it can be overwhelming for an individual to get up to speed and understand all the nuances of it. And both remote work and AI happen so quickly that there are a lot of opinions out there that are sensationalized, and depending on who you listen to, you can lead you down the wrong path. So it can be challenging to find the good information that you can trust. And I feel that in talking to a lot of other organizations, some are just still trying to catch up to using Slack, for example, or instant messaging or that sort of thing in their business. And there's a lot out there that's moving very fast that and they can't keep up with.
Definitely. I think, yeah, there's a lot of platforms out there for businesses to use, but you have to make sure that you're trained into how to use it and you're using the right ones and you're not using too many as well.
Yeah, you can go to some AI pages that show a list of all the tools that use AI
Yeah,
now, and it's overwhelming. It really is. Even for someone who's spent a career in technology, each tool needs to you have to understand its purpose. Does it do its job? Is it the right tool? What does it do with its information? How do I, and so on and so forth. And when you're faced with a page full of like hundreds and hundreds of AI options, it's a lot of luck in some cases. In other cases, it's just overwhelming, and sometimes you just pull back to what you know. And so we're going through a gold rush as it might be with these tools, and as is typically as we saw the dot-com boom back in the early 2000s, that there will be a natural process of those companies being absorbed by the larger companies, becoming more or less, some will become more relevant, others will be less relevant, and over time we're going to see some leaders emerge. And so in some respects, it might be best for a entrepreneur to not dip their toes too far into the waters, lest a tool that you're not familiar with causes you the harm that puts you under.
so like in case that company shuts down and your entire operation has to shut down.
That's one scenario. Or it doesn't live up to the promise. That's one of the things I've always been very sensitive about technology. And from the very get-go, there's been companies that have been promising that this technology will do something for you. But when you really look under the hood, it still requires an understanding of what it's doing, and you have some work on your part to give it the right information and understand the information it gives back to you.
Definitely. I think the learning curve is, even though it's a lot easier than everyone learning programming, but it's a bit still quite a bit steep for you to understand the software before you're able to like just flow with it.
And for people like me who I need to understand things, and maybe I got this from my dad, who was really big into cars when he was younger. You take an engine and tear it apart and put it back together to understand how it worked. These days you don't really have to worry about how most people don't have to worry about how the ins and outs of an engine, but I'm like that from a technology standpoint. I need to understand, okay, where's this data going? What is it doing? How is it working? And it's hard for me to accept the fact that there's a black box that's going to do all this for me and not really understand what's going on under the hood. That leaves me with a little sense of anxiety. And so we're moving into that realm of technology where we just have to like, okay, it does that. Okay, great. I don't know how, but it does that.
I know it bothers me as well because I'm super curious. I'm like, I have to know, but then there are all these blocks that are like they don't actually want you to know what's inside the black box as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you highlight a few essential tech tools that non-technical founders can employ to boost productivity and foster a thriving remote culture?
Yeah, absolutely. And these will be somewhat a little bit boring because I think that people who get into entrepreneurs need to have some foundational stuff. But I really feel like Microsoft's been killing it recently. Everyone wants people to think they're out of the game, but they come back and reinvent themselves. And the stuff that they're doing with Office 365 these days, and if you just start with your email platform, you get the email through them that gives you access to all the tools, Word, PowerPoint, and so on and so forth. Then you have Teams, which is more popular than Slack now, and it's a way for teams to communicate, and it's evolving quickly as well. SharePoint, Power Automate, if you get into that as well. And then we also use a little tool called Planner, which I find very useful for helping with just the day-to-day of businesses. Outside of that, there's lots of good cloud-based tools like Monday. I find is a great tool for project management and data tracking. I use Calendly a lot, or HubSpot. HubSpot's fantastic as well. Confluence, HubSpot's great for sales and marketing, and Confluence or Notion are good for storing data in the cloud, storing pages in the cloud. Of course, there's ChatGPT, which for $20 a month, I don't know why anyone wouldn't buy it for every one of their team members, because are you going to get $20 a month worth of value back? Absolutely. And finally, one of the ones I rely on quite a bit is Grammarly. It's a simple tool, but man, it catches a lot of stuff that I should have written better. and even just paying for you wouldn't think you need to pay for the subscribed version, but that version does so much more for you. And at least I find that, and it's one of my go-to basic tools that I'd recommend.
So if you had to choose one out of all those tools, like you only have one, you can only have one, which one would you choose?
Maybe a bit of a cheating, maybe a bit of a cheat to say I would prefer an Office 365 account because it gives you all these tools. But one of the ones I think that is valuable these days is ChatGPT, and we go to it all the time for a ton of different reasons, and it is like a personal assistant for me.
That's excellent. So how has ChatGPT transformed your workflow, Shane? And are there any unexpected ways that you've integrated AI into your daily routine?
The thing that really surprised me, and every once in a while I look back at this and like, I haven't really Googled in a while, and maybe I'm being overly reliant on it, but for the things I need answers to, ChatGPT gives me a real good starting point. And I wouldn't say that there's a routine as such. I don't log into it on the same time every day for the same thing, but it helps me reduce writer's block. So if I'm writing it, one of the I've used it quite often. Hey, can you finish the sentence for me? I know what the sentence should be, but I just can't remember it right now. Or I'm missing a word, and like, here's the word I'm looking for, and it tells me what the word is. Those things save me hours, and also it keeps me in flow and focus, right? So that it helps for my productivity. The other thing is it helps me remind me of best practices. I have experienced a lot of things over my career, and it's hard to remember everything you should do right. And but when I need to talk to somebody about, hey, here's some ideas of ways of doing something better, I can ask it for best practices. And oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Oh, that's a good one too. And I'm able to then communicate best practices. And I'm starting using it for images as well. They're not I don't know if I'm saving time with it yet, but it's fun to see what it comes up with. And the most recent upgrade that allows you to just choose the parts of the image you want it to focus on is a game changer for its image creation process. Again, it's like a personal assistant to me. I got someone there always, okay, how do I do this? Oh, hey, thanks for reminding me. And that's how I use it.
Definitely. So like finishing your sentences so it understands you super well. It's like the dream that us humans have always wanted, right? Like someone who just like
Yeah.
knows exactly how to help us.
And that's one of the things I use it for the most is it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's been a hard day. You're ready to just call it quits. I can't remember how this sentence is supposed to end. Hey, can you help me finish the sentence? I'm obviously stay polite with it just in case at some point they take over and
Absolutely.
they'll remember those who were happy with him, and I don't want to be on their bad side. But hey, can you help me finish the sentence? And before you know it, you've got your brain block removed, which is fantastic.
Fantastic. So moving into a more personal dimension, Shane, could you share a significant hurdle you've overcome in your journey? How has this shaped your approach to technology and leadership?
Yeah, sure. So I've always been somewhat self-conscious, so I don't always ask for help. I'm a bit of a proud individual, and maybe not always for the best reasons. So I like to solve things myself. I like to be the owner of the solution, so I said I don't always ask for help. When I was working at Disney, this is a number of years ago, I was one of 13 project managers who was selected to lead the team as the manager, and I was also the most recently hired. And so it was a difficult pill for many people on the team to swallow, and there was a lot of friction with me and them. And to combat that friction, I sent out an anonymous survey to my team asking for honest feedback and give me some constructive help here. And I got a lot of honest feedback back. And it gave me a list of things to work on that I would otherwise have taken years of counseling to discover. And it was really only possible because technology played the mediator. It gave us a safe place. They knew that they could put this information into a form. I think it was SurveyMonkey at the time. It would go to a place that would anonymize who they were, unless they said a few things in the comments that betrayed them. And then I could go there and read it and summarize the information. And over the years, it's become a bit of a regular habit of mine to send out surveys to get people to give me the opportunity to provide me with constructive feedback. And I've since become more open to my limitations and failures and making learning a central a personal value of mine. I've also recently learned that this creates psychological safety for team members, which is a real driver of productivity, and it helps people feel that they have the opportunity to fail as well. And like I'm sure many people have said before, learning and progress comes from failure, not from success. It really, by opening myself up to that, it really helped me grow.
I really love that because I feel like usually when you have to give out a feedback form, it's not option, it's not by choice. You're forced to do it, but the fact that you decided to go ahead and make that feedback form and get the feedback from your team members and take the initiative to improve, I think it's very commendable.
Yeah, and there's always someone always has something to share that you can. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying here, and I'll keep that in mind, and I'll work on that, and I try. You know, it's funny to go back to to some of the surveys in 10 years ago and see what people are saying. It's also humble to see the same comments 10 years later, either from a positive side, or sometimes there's things I still have bad habits I can't get clear of, and it reminds me there's still lots of work to do.
Absolutely. So, reflecting on your career, especially your time with brands like Disney, could you share a technology-driven project that you particularly are proud of? How did it challenge and enrich you personally?
Right. Prior to working at Vertira, I was working with a team that was building a new comic book app, and we were taking 2D drawings, processing them in Maya to create a layered 3D image, and pushing all those assets through a content pipeline to a mobile app that turned it into an app that you could swipe from one side to the next. And it was like a parallax effect. It was the kind of reminds me of those books you may have had when a child, where you pull a tab and something would move. But it created an interactive comic book, which was really cool. But we had a small team, and we did everything right. We had a fully automated deployment. The team understood the benefit of breaking down the work into smaller packages. We did proper UI UX testing, and everything just worked. And it was the most productive team I've ever been on from a software development standpoint. And it really showed me that what was possible when everyone knows their role and works for the benefit of everyone on the team as opposed to themselves. For example, the typical software developer, sorry, I don't want to slag software developers, but often they just want to code, and they just want to get back to that point, that sense of flow they get and satisfaction they get when they create something. If they're not creating the right thing, it can be devastating for them when that is either tossed away or someone tells them it's the wrong thing, and when they realize that they need to be more involved in the process to come up with those things, they contribute far more. And this is where you get the concept of the 5x developer, right? It's a person who isn't just a developer, but they realize that coding is the last step, and they work with the team to make sure that everyone understands what's being done. Yeah, so it was a fantastic opportunity. Unfortunately, it was one of those apps killed by COVID. The team didn't survive too much longer after we went home from the work office.
I really liked what you said about how it's a lot more than coding, making sure that the app works in the market as well, and making sure you're not just like building something for the sake of it, but building something that people actually want and collaborating with your team.
Yeah, and it was one of the few teams I've been on. Typical thing, you're supposed to do a daily stand-up, right? It was one of the few teams that understood that you're not there to provide your update. You're there to listen to everyone else's update. You're there to give your update for the benefit of everyone else, who then listens to what they're saying and say, okay, I'm paying attention to what Mark has to say, because what he has to say might impact me, or I might be able to stop him from working on something he doesn't need to work on, or I might be able to help him. And that small under self-actualization of what the team needed to do made them so much more productive. And we also enjoyed everything. And so we all got very involved in what going after the features the customer wanted as well. There's few egos on the team. We did a lot of play testing. It's one of the fun parts. We went to Comic Cons to show the product to real people, and we got real feedback, and we built based on that feedback as opposed to what people wanted internally. But yeah, it was just one of those. I hope to be on a team like that again at some point soon.
Definitely, that really sounds like a team that every developer would want to be on.
Absolutely, yeah. Someone smart just recently had a conversation with me about this as well, and I want to give them credit for this concept and this awareness. Is that Agile came at a time back in the late 90s and early 2000s when it was common practice to write everything down on a piece of paper for a new software application. So you can imagine getting like a 400-page document that outlines everything you need to do to build a new piece of software. And then when you inevitably run into something that wasn't fully thought out, you have to, and the customer saw it and they didn't think it met their needs, or there was something that just didn't work, and you have to go back and do a change request, go back in the documentation or rewrite it. It was an incredibly slow process. So that's where Agile came from. And I feel that because Agile was initially designed to clap back at that challenge, people may have taken it a bit too far in following methodologies to the letter. What I feel a business owner needs to keep in mind is when you're in a situation where you don't know exactly what you want, the only time this really applies is if you're building a house. And even then, it's like you still need there's still some time for you to figure out what the interior might look like after it's built. But when you build a house, you have to do the framing before you put the walls up, right? If you don't know exactly what you want, then you need to try to get something in the hands of a customer as soon as possible so they can tell you. Time and time again in my career, I've been proven wrong. I am I have these great hunches. I have these things that sound like they should be fantastic. And I even get people telling me that they are good ideas. But until you can get someone to give you money for something, you won't know for sure if it's something that will sell en masse to other people. And it's simple as that. So don't make assumptions about what people want and follow the lead of what people will pay for. And to me, that's the biggest thing. It's a classic. We hear far too many, if we build it, they will come stories about startups. I've even been a part of a couple. Since Agile first came out, we've learned a lot more about how people work about productivity as well. So that's a different conversation entirely. But Agile also helps us understand nuances. If you work 50 hours a week, you're actually less productive than working 40 hours a week. And if you work 50 hours a week consistently over the period of several weeks, your productivity goes down. And so there's a whole bunch of aspects around how people work, and that dovetails nicely into what my beliefs are around remote work as well, giving people time to recharge. No one gets an 8-hour day out of anybody, and recognizing that people are machines in their own way and need time to recharge and be productive. And that's a much more complicated system to manage.
Absolutely. I really like what you said about how you can't just assume that what the customers want, because I feel like this is a mistake that people keep repeating over and over again, especially first-time founders. They get really excited, they have this new idea, and they're like, okay, I'm just gonna build this entire app. People are going to come, but people don't come. And how do you make sure that this is like completely grilled into the minds of founders today?
Eric Ries did a pretty good job trying to lean startup. He provided with that book. Any entrepreneur needs to read it. It's right up there with Who Moved My Cheese or some of the other big entrepreneur books that have been out there. And the thing is that entrepreneurs will often listen to their friends or their network about what it is that they're trying to build, and they'll get positive feedback. As humans, we don't want conflict naturally. Very few people will tell you exactly what they feel, and as such, they get this confirmation bias where they hear from a lot of people, oh yeah, that'll be successful. But again, until you get someone to actually put their own money on the line, you won't know what it's worth and how many people want it. And that is the first step. You have to find the least amount of work you can do to prove that out. And as Eric Ries points out in his book, sometimes it's just a page on the web with a button on it that click this button for $5 and I'll give you something. And until you can prove that lots of people want to push that button, don't build it.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the time our close networks, they're not our target audience, so asking them is also counterproductive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So in practical terms, how does integrating tools like HubSpot streamline sales and marketing for non-tech businesses? Could you share an anecdote where this made a tangible difference?
Sure. And a tool like HubSpot makes selling in a modern marketplace feasible. On the surface, it allows your sales teams to keep track of each sale, but then reminding people to follow up to ensure things aren't missed, sending emails out. It's an amazing tool and a pretty amazing platform. So we ran a program over the summer last year where we held a series of expert roundtables, and that was a thinly veiled marketing tool to try to find new clients. But what HubSpot allows us to do is we are able to throw a bunch of people connect people on LinkedIn, throw a bunch of their contact information into HubSpot, put them on an email drip campaign that helped them reminded them of upcoming roundtables, allow them to sign up for a roundtable, and then send them content afterwards. There's also allows you to have landing pages and that allowed people to join that way as well. And so it really allowed us to nurture relationships and warm people up And then once they were part of our network, allowed us to track their progress. So it's a pretty impressive piece of software. And then what we also do with it is when we close a deal, we have an API. We connect our software to it. Sorry, we connect it to our project management system. And when we close a deal, it automatically sets up the project and informs our accounting software. And this saves us a lot of time, and it also ensures the information is accurate.
Absolutely. So it essentially automates the entire sales and marketing process for your team.
Yeah, it can. It takes a while to set it up. Obviously, there's a lot of decisions to go into that, and you can get to a place where you put an ad out on Google, it sends them to a web page, they sign up for something, to get a digital download or something, and from there, the whole process just takes care of itself. And it's amazing what can do its job while you're sleeping at night.
That's excellent. So if you could travel back in time, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self about navigating the tech world and personal growth?
Yeah, a good question. So I would argue to not chase perfection. So goes back to one of the things I mentioned earlier about finding out how soon you can get someone to pay for something, but get products out in front of people as soon as possible because they provide you with the information you need to make it better. I often say that customers won't necessarily help your product innovate, they just make it better. So they will refine it. You're still responsible for the innovation, but even then you got to say, hey, let's try this new feature out and see how people react to it. So this might sound incredible, but I actually invented Facebook in 2001. So 3 years before it actually launched, I created a tool for my friend group that allowed people to upload pictures and chat with each other, and everyone loved it. It was the biggest thing for about a year. The mistake was I didn't see it as a product. I kept it as a private to my friends, and I saw it as a little interesting thing that we were doing. And I didn't let anyone invite anyone. I even had people ask if I could can I invite my friends to this? I was reluctant to say yes because I didn't know those friends. And that would have been something that would have taken off and would have changed my life. There have been other tools in my heyday when I was more of a software developer, more in charge of a software development team, that we spent way too much time building the perfect tool before getting it in front of people. And so that ultimately goes back to what I was saying earlier. Get feedback from people who are going to buy it as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I feel like people go through that mistakes a lot, like in their earlier days, because you really try to make perfect things, but these things are never perfect, right? And you just have to get a lot of stuff out there and just not be so scared of letting more people see it, which is a shame with you and Facebook, because I feel like, yeah, because I was like, oh my gosh, that is a shame. But you learn from your mistakes, right? And you're here today.
But it wasn't until years later someone said, hey, you actually created Facebook 10 years ago. I'm like, really? I was so close. But again, I'm sure there's obviously a lot of other hurdles that I would have had to get through. But I just wish I wasn't one of them.
So, lastly, looking into the future, what emerging technologies do you think non-technical founders should be excited about? How do you think this innovation inspires you on a personal level?
Yeah, I'm sure everyone's answer these days will be AI. It's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. Every tool has found a way to incorporate it into the system, and you can't go anywhere without realizing, without bumping into it. And I think it has some potential to affect some real change. I'm still waiting to understand exactly how it's going to create more work or more jobs for people. So far, it looks like everything it's going to do is eventually just replace jobs, but maybe that's a good thing as well. Maybe it's going to allow us to recognize that as humans, we need time to enjoy life, and there's that utopia I might be able to create. But what it does do for me is it reminds me that I have yet again a lot to learn. I can't go into the next month thinking I know everything I need to know about AI because I use ChatGPT. There's many different chat bots and many different tools, many ways to integrate AI into processes and workflows. And then there's whole levels of AI being used for things I probably can't even comprehend. So it reminds me again that I need to continue learning and putting myself out there and not getting stagnant and left behind.
Definitely. So I think continuously getting updated on AI is so vital because it changes so quickly, and every founder needs to make sure they're ahead of the curve and not feel complacent because, hey, I know this thing, so that's enough. In a few months, it's not.
That's exactly. And it is really changing fast. And it does remind me a lot about the dot-com boom 20 years, 23 years ago. Geez. And people were making stores that didn't need to be made. Hey, buy waffle makers online. It just wasn't, no one, or sorry, the classic was for us. I was in a web development company and we started in 1998. So I actually lived through this. And the classic was I want to build a mall people can walk through, and when they can see in the window all the things we own, and you can try it on yourself. And we heard, even in my small town in Canada, we heard probably that once or twice a week someone had that dream. It came to Amazon to simplify it. Like, we don't need to walk through malls. We need to be able to quickly use the tool fast and click on things. And what we want is an effective process. And I'm waiting for that to fall out with AI. Right now, AI is everywhere. I don't need LinkedIn, AI and LinkedIn for me to tell me what my reply to a comment should be. Is that helpful? Is it needed? And so same thing happens. Confluence added, and I'm not trying to slag Confluence, but they added AI. And do I need help writing the thing I'm writing? Does AI know enough to help me with this? And oftentimes it just gets in the way. But there are places it works, and I'm just waiting for that to start falling out.
Definitely. So you don't want just like the little things that are like just helping you finish a comment, but you want like something that's essentially very life-changing and it's wow, this is it, right?
Yeah, help me save some time. Do something I don't need to do, and but leave the things for me that I want to do. Yeah.
Replying to your friends, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Shane, thank you so much for coming today and sharing all your expertise.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Benata.
Thank you.